When I planned out my preaching text for Lent, I skipped over Psalm 23, choosing instead to focus on readings from the Gospel of John. They just seemed to fit with where I thought we would be as a congregation going through a pastoral transition. So much for me being able to predict the future. After the weeks that we've been living through with all this change and upheaval, I've ditched those sermon notes. It seemed to be a good time to revisit an old favorite. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. It is a beloved and familiar psalm, most often requested at funerals and memorial services. We see it recited in film. It's read aloud in hospital rooms. 15 lines of poetry, 57 words in Hebrew, and yet so much comfort given to generations of people stretched across the globe, differing in culture, race, and beliefs, and yet all finding comfort and solace in those words. We may know it best in the King James Version. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. Our reading today is a contemporary rendition, written to be shared in corporate worship. You are my shepherd, O God, I need nothing more. You let me lie down in green pastures. The power of the psalm breaks through, whether it's in the lyrical poetry of the King James verse or in more colloquial wordings. It's a bit of comfort in unsettling times. There are stories of children who were orphaned during World War II, some because of the bombing in Britain, others were brought over from Europe, and the children were placed in refugee camps and orphanages. The Guardian newspaper interviewed one Holocaust survivor, Arik Hirsch, who was forced into a labor camp at age 11 and then later transferred to Auschwitz. He tells the story of being evacuated from Auschwitz to Buchenwald and then on to Czechoslovakia on what he called the train of damnation. A whole month on open wagons without food, he remembered. We ate grass. I ate the leather of my left shoe to keep going. I didn't swallow it, but I chewed it. Eventually, when he was 16, he was rescued and flown to England. He remembers being on the plane and being fed. The children were all given bread, and Hirsch says, we thought it was cake. They gave us each a piece, and it was great. Children in those refugee camps and orphanages were well cared for, but the experiences had been so harrowing, their hunger so intense that many could not believe there would be any food left in the morning. So they would take bread with them to their beds. The presence of bread at night brought some peace of mind, because there had been food for today, and there would be food again tomorrow. The psalmist begins with words of assurance, I shall not want, I need nothing more. In these days of anxiety, it's easy to get swept away by the panic. The empty shelves at grocery stores bear witness to the fear. The psalmist, though, begins not with anxiety, but with trust. I shall not want. Many of us have been sheltering in place, voluntarily keeping ourselves at a distance from others. Perhaps it's because you're in a higher risk group, or maybe because someone you love is. Or maybe you're doing your part to help our communities through this. I'm wondering, how will we be changed by this experience? Will our understandings of what we need, what we truly need, be changed? So many years we've been immersed in a culture of want, of instant gratification, of shopping at our fingertips. And the psalmist suggests there is another worldview, one shaped not by lack, by what we don't have, but shaped by in whose company we dwell. Now, don't get me wrong. The writer of the psalm is not offering some pie-in-the-sky optimism. This is a poem bubbling up from the earth. And we may not know the life of a shepherd anymore, but the language and the imagery is still evocative for us. You make me lie down in green pastures. You lead me beside still waters. You revive my spirit. The Hebrew word translated as spirit means life or life breath, as if almost stopping breath and then brought back to life. This psalm is rooted in the world, in the delights and the needs of life and earth, of food, rest, renewal, all the basics of life that we need to live and thrive. It's only after that assurance of daily bread and much needed rest that the psalmist moves from tangible needs to human longing for meaning and purpose. You guide me in the right paths. Even now, as some folks are panicking about their personal toilet paper supplies, there are stories which highlight the goodness at the heart of humanity. Some of you have been delivering groceries or supplies to folks who shouldn't be going out to the store right now. Others have been checking in regularly with phone calls or text messages. Today I read the story of two 20-somethings in New York City who started a movement called Invisible Hands. And they just set up a website to connect volunteers with folks who need help. You put in a request, a volunteer checks in with you, completes your shopping needs, and then delivers it to your door. Or perhaps you saw the story out of Oakland, California this week, where members of the Disability Justice Culture Club have been making large batches of hand sanitizer and distributing health kits with hand sanitizer and disinfectants and vitamin kits to people living in the Oakland homeless encampments. One of the volunteers is Stacy Milburn. She's living with muscular dystrophy and uses a ventilator to breathe. She explained, "We are particularly concerned with people in encampments who don't have access to soap and water." The concern of the members of the Disability Justice Culture Club comes from being a part of a community which knows what it's like to be isolated. They're often used to living in crisis mode. Like the psalmist, they have walked through valleys as dark as death. We know those dark places, when death seems to cover over everything, when all that is good fades into the shadows, when hopelessness pushes in at us on all sides. The psalmist sees despairing times as part of the journey. The dark times can't be wished away, and God doesn't pop in to rescue us, vanishing our troubles with a flick of some magic wand. The shadows may linger, but God is with the psalmist and with us in those dark moments. Wendell Berry writes of dark times in his poem, The Peace of Wild Things. When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound, in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting for their light. For a time I rest in the grace of the world and am free. The psalmist is able to trust that beyond the darkness there is grace. You spread a table for me under the eyes of my enemies. It's such an odd verse, I think. Could the psalmist see this feast table as a sign of vindication? Or is it another way to say, in the midst of the threats and danger, I can set aside my anxiety, my despair. In the midst of pandemic, I can be assured that God offers peace and joy. It's not in the text, but in my own spiritual wanderings, I ask myself, What do I do with a banquet? Do I hoard what I have? Or is the feast I've been given an opportunity to dispel some of the darkness in the world? Our cups so often brim over, filled beyond what we need. And yet we hold on, not to bread, but to fear. Goodness and kindness unfailing will follow me all my days. The Hebrew word translated as follow has a more dynamic meaning, to run after or pursue. So whether we're at ease near still waters or we're being overrun by dark clouds, goodness and kindness will find us. In one of our online evening prayer gatherings on Zoom this week, folks shared acts of kindness they'd seen or experienced. What a shift in our perspective if we trust that kindness and goodness are never far from us, that they are always seeking us out, running after us, waiting to fill our cups to overflowing. How might that change us in moments like the one we're living in? The writer of our Lenten study book, Bruce Epperly, describes this psalm as a Hebrew version of a Celtic encircling prayer. This prayer practice weaves together our bodies, our imaginations, our longings, our hopes, all into prayer. Now you can physically draw a circle around yourself using your hand and turning around. Or you can imagine drawing a circle around yourself or the one for whom you're praying. But either way, you see yourself and others as encircled. And in doing so, you're reminded of God's living presence surrounding us, accompanying us in this moment and in every moment. An encircling prayer is an enactment of our trust in the presence of the sacred, wherever we are. If we are out in the world or at home sheltering in place, praying a prayer of protection. We would pray, circle us, Lord. Keep comfort near and discouragement far. Or keep peace within and turmoil without. You can change the prayer as you need. Keep hope within, keep despair without. Keep peace within and anxiety without. Bruce Epperly offers a longer version of the prayer. Circle of love, open my heart. Circle of wisdom, enlighten my mind. Circle of trust, protect my path. Circle of healing, grant me new life. This week, I invite you to hold this psalm close. Keep it with you as a reminder that you have been in the presence of the sacred today, and you will be held in the loving embrace of the holy tonight and each day to come. For just as the psalmists trust, we too will make our home in the house of God for as long as we live. Be well, be kind, and always be the church where you are.